Hey guys, Blue here, and I'm super excited to bring you guys Kaiba's deck profile from Yu-Gi-Oh! Pyramid of Light. So, going back a long time ago, so we've been after the Battle City came out, and there was news of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie, and we all got so excited, like, Mom, Dad, Yu-Gi-Oh's in the movie theater! And it came with packs of cards in the theater, and a new pack came out from the movie, and there was a lot of cool stuff. And one of the great things was, it was the same characters. It was Yugi and Kaiba and Joey, Pegasus 2. And of course, one of the great things I think was Kaiba, because it was kind of a bit of his story. He was on his quest for the God cards from Yugi. So he was the one who kind of set in motion the chain of events which led to the finale. But I love the way Kaiba was done because, of course, the movie, which debatably some people say can, some people say not canon. I just roll with it and say, sure, let's stick it in the canon. So, I mean, the movie was definitely true to, I think, the Kaiba character. He was still arrogant. He was still flying around the Blue Eyes jet to, that rock song. So you sit there in the theater, you're like, yeah, this is Kaiba. This is completely, utterly, arrogantly Kaiba. And of course, his deck reflects none other than Kaiba being, really a lot based off his Battle City deck. A couple new inclusions. But yeah, like all the characters in the movie, the decks definitely felt like them. Nothing strange, nothing new thrown in. What was great about the movie for these decks was that Yugi, Kaiba, and Pegasus' deck lists were all published with the novelization of the movie. So there was no need to really kind of build a deck and figure out, okay, what do we have 2 copies of, 1 copy of, what should we kind of supplement the deck with, like we do for some characters. So we really just took the list and we built it card for card with a few exceptions of cards that aren't printed. So I'll definitely say there's nothing special about our deck. We just copied the list. Because it was provided. There was no reason to try to build a Kaiba movie deck when it says, here's the Kaiba movie deck in print. But we've made 3 changes, which of course I will explain when we get there. But first up, none other than his 3 blue eyes. Also, what was cool for the movie, for all of us who were watching the dub, because that's what was on the cartoons in the morning, was we saw the cards with the English print on in the game for once, as opposed to the dubbed version, which has the attack stats, the stars, and there's no text. So it was cool to see Blue Eyes just as we see it here, but in the movie. So 3 Blue Eyes obviously becomes a key part to his strategy to defeat Yugi's Egyptian god monsters. 2 Lesser Dragon, so kind of giving Kaiba some more beater support in addition to his trusty Vorse Raider. And X-Head Cannon. Again, it's predominantly Battle City coming back, because that was when, a lot of the characters shifted their decks. And they kind of took those and worked with them going forward. A lot of the stuff we see in Duelist Kingdom got dropped and never came back. But Battle City seemed to be the framework for what became these decks going forward when they had, more concrete rules and stuff. So, starting the effect monsters, first up is Blue Eye Shining Dragon, being, one of the focal points of the movie, was printed really close to the anime version. We're making 2 changes. This one says it cannot be special summoned except by tributing Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. That's how it was in the movie. Except Yugi was able to Monster Reborn it to take a second crack at destroying Pyramid of Light. So ours will say it must first be special summoned by, because that's the card text that Konami always uses. Similar to rituals. If you summon them the proper way first, summon them, then they're free to grab back. So this way you can kind of create that same dynamic, because the important thing was Yugi took it back. So Yugi had the Blue Shining Dragon, which you couldn't do without that amendment. Secondly, the big thing is this card does not have the destruction effect. So the whole thing with Blue Eyes Shining Dragon was that it would destroy Pyramid of Light allowing Kaiba to bring back the God cards, but our copy does not let us do that. So the second change to this monster is that you contribute it to destroy one face-up card on the field. And now, this will all be in the document, of course, our RAD document. It'll say word for word everything. But now, our changes allow us to do what happened in the movie, that you could Monster Reborn this monster and tribute it to destroy a card. Really simple. Then Death Feral Imp, Familiar Knight, and that was one of our new cards that came with the movie. That and his buddy that we saw, Rare Metal Dragon. So, definitely a cool card. Nothing super special stat-wise, but the effect lets each player special summon a monster. Kaiser Seahorse, always good to come back, especially with the blue eyes. Lord of Dragons, Kaiba's staple with his blue eyes. Pete and the Dark Clown in 3 copies, because we did see Kaiba actually use the 3 copies. Unlike stuff, say Giant Germ, where we saw him use 2, and maybe he had the 3rd, but we didn't include that because we never saw the 3rd one. We did see 3, it's also listed at 3, but we actually saw the quantity that was listed. So, Pettin the Dark Clown is a really fun card because it works like Malicious in that, you remove one and you summon another one. And it's an interesting card, I think, for Kaiba. So it's more like going off, I guess Sagi, because that's Kaiba's only connection to clowns. This one just being a little bit more effective. Next up is 2 Spirit Dragon. So something we saw in Virtual World, nothing new to Kaiba's deck, but not from his Balisade deck. The other new inclusion, Rare Metal Dragon. 2400, 1200, cannot be normal summoned or set, so that's why Familiar Knight is great in combination with it, because you off the Knight, you each get a summon, but what's your opponent going to summon that's 4 stars? That has equal to or more attack possibly than 2400 Rare Metal Dragon. And then Union Monsters, Y Dragon Head, Z Metal Tank, because of course he has X, he has Y and Z. His Ritual, his Paladin of White Dragon, which we see, of course, he utilizes. And that also comes around in Waking the Dragons. So we see him utilize that to pull out Blue Eyes as well. So Kaiba's deck, a little bit more Blue Eye-centric, not as much so as in, say, Dark Side Dimensions. But the Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Pyramid of Light, Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, whatever you see it printed. So it was the old school one. It came out so long ago, so a little bit of inclusion was fine then, and of course now in today's day and age, you just throw everything Blue Eyes in there. And moving on to the spell cards. First up, Card of Demise. So it's obviously a rad card, but it's not one of the new ones we're adding in, which is why I phrased, it. So if you had seen our channel and you know the changes we've made, we had made new ones. If you'd never seen our channel before, then we're just adding on the amount of cards we changed so that they play more like the anime, in which case this card has the anime effect of you draw 5 cards, on the 5th turn, you off your hand. The effect that came printed with it is obviously more tame. It makes the card not outright banned in competitive play, so that it gives you the draw effect, but it has a cost. And that's fine. It needs that, so it's not, super running around crazy. But ours is the anime effect because it's anime. We make this stuff up. Who cares? Next is Cost Down, followed by Dark Core. That was newer inclusion of Kaiba's cards. Because one of his little kind of themes or strategies he had, to a small extent, I'm not saying it was a huge thing, but was removing cards from play. He has a lot more cards, but remove cards from play. His only one previously was, or the main one he used was Interdimensional Mana Transporter. So Dark Core is like that, but in spell card form, and does anyone, not just one of your own. Next up is Diffusion, so we've seen that before in a lot of the decks. One of the newer inclusions is Dimension Fusion. So, again, working out of remove from play. Pay 2,000 life points, and both players can special summon as many of their monsters as possible out of remove from play. So, you pay the life point cost, you both get the effect. And, again, Kaiba seemed to be interested this time in removing monsters from play and then pulling them back in to amass them on the field. Enemy controller, Megamorph, which we saw him use in his virtual test duel against Yugi. He doubled the attack of Blue his ultimate to a whopping 9,000. And then Yugi said, "Here, I tribute to give Obelisk infinite attack." And then just the machine exploded and everyone screamed. And Kai was like, "Well, damn." Monster Reborn. Mystical Space Typhoon. Nobleman of Crossout. So that was on deck list. Not something we really saw him use. But not a bad card to have, really. Polymerization to make his Blue as Ultimate Fusion. Pot of Greed lets you draw 2 cards from your deck. Soul Release. So again, Dark Core and Soul Release were what Kaiba used in his duel against Pegasus to banish X and Y, summon Z, and then go with his XYZ Dragon Capital Cannon. Fleet of Summoning Dragon, always handy with Lord of Dragons and Blue Eyes. And then, of course, Paladin, White Dragon Ritual to summon Paladin of White Dragon. That is his spell card lineup. His trap cards, they list him at 6 trap cards. Unfortunately, the Konami only has printed 4 of them. So Kaiba is the only one. Well, Yugi too had cards that weren't printed, but still had enough cards actually to still have made 40 card decks without us having to, get creative and throw stuff in. With the exception of Yugi's deck, which also has the Sphere mode and Phoenix mode, because they go with Ra, since they were originally just part of Ra's own effects and not separate cards. Anyway, so he's missing Deck Destruction Virus, which took 10 cards out of Yugi's deck every time, which Yugi still worked around impressively, because the main character and all. And Attack Guidance Armor, a card we see a lot from Kaiba, and Konami still has not printed it. Still hopeful, always hopeful, one day it'll come out in a Kaiba set or something. There are cards we have that are similar to it, but we're not going to put in a substitute for that card. We want Attack Guidance Armor, or we'll just leave it out because it's not something so crucial that we need a substitute for it, even though we could use something similar. But anyway, trap cards that we actually have. Cloning. So we know it does. It copies a monster, or it clones a monster. Alright, so moving on with the trap cards. The next 2 trap cards are both new, as far as in terms of what we've seen in our character deck build so far. So not new cards, but new for us. And both of them we have errated, one maybe controversial. So the first one up is Pyramid of Light. So obviously the namesake of the movie, new card. So the big difference is, if you don't already know, because if you weren't someone who's around years and years ago, Pyramid of Light was designed to remove the Egyptian god monsters from the field. And when this card originally came out during the first movie, the Egyptian god monsters, Obelisk, Ra, and Slifer, although existed as cards, were only the promo cards, the ones without effects. They were not tournament legal. They were only, just cool to have cards. So there was no need to have the effect even mention them. The effect only covers that this card's removed from the field. Andro Sphinx and Sphinx Talea are also removed, and that leads you into Thinian. But what we did, obviously, was to change it to include banishing the god monsters. So, and of course, we're going to have a formal definition like we always do in our RAD document, but it will say along the lines of, when this card is activated, banish all face-up divine beast monsters. And as long as this card is on the field, any divine beasts are then banished. Because remember, the thing is, the gods could not return to the field. So we interpret that to mean that as long as the card was active, I'm sure, you could summon one of them, theoretically, but it would be immediately removed. So that's how we're going to play it, because without obligatory summon, having all 3 at the same time is really unlikely. It's more plausible that we'll see one be summoned, and then you can trigger the trap card. but then having on the field. We saw too in the movie that they could not come back until Pyramid of Light was gone, so it basically it kicks them out and keeps them out. But in the case of one being summoned after the activation, it would be sent out. We didn't go with a cannot be summoned or set type deal. We just said if it gets summoned, it gets kicked out immediately. So that's how it's going to work. No matter what any of the Egyptian gods say, if they are unaffected by it, can't be targeted by Pyramid of Light, we have it set up so it will absolutely and definitely remove and banish the 3 Egyptian beasts. That's what it's made for. And then the next card, now this is the questionably controversial errata. Return from a different dimension. Why? Well, it's all because this was, although never outright said, it was very heavily, explicitly implied that Kaiba would use this card to return Slifer Rod Obelisk to his own field once he had destroyed Pyramid of Light. And that's, of course, not what Return from the Different Dimension does. Return from the Different Dimension lets you pay half of your life points to summon back your monsters from your move from play. And one of the things that we felt was that this was absolutely, without being just outright said, this was implied to be Kaiba's card to take back the duel. And you can always make the argument of maybe he had another card, which they didn't really seem to allude to, and maybe Kaiba was just completely wrong. Right. Kaiba, of all people, would just completely use the wrong card. So what we're going with is that whatever it may be printed to say in the anime, every implication is that Kaiba could have used Return from the Different Dimension to bring back monsters from either players removed from play, and then summon them to the field. So that's what our errata is. So that, if you were to play with Kaiba's deck with this card, theoretically you could pull off his banish the god monsters and bring them back with Return from the Different Dimension. We wanted to make sure that this deck could play that combo because that's what it really built up for Kaiba to do. Now, this really could have just been due to, poor script writing, right? That they gave Kaiba this card that doesn't really work this way, but was meant to in the movie. We don't care at all about any could have, would have, should have. Aside from the fact that they pointed at this card to be the key to bringing back the Egyptian gods, and for that to have happened, it needs to be able to take it needs to be the same exact effect, except from either players removed from play zone, which is what ours is. Again, a formal definition description will be in our document, but that's what it is. That's how we're playing it. If you disagree, you're welcome to, but it's not something we want to change because we want to make sure that most of our erratas are because the card was used in such a different way in the anime that, it's our copy is either missing a very key and crucial effect, like Pyramid of Light and like Blue Eye Shining Dragon, or the printed version we have has, a bunch of extra effects that would make those cards a little bit too one-sided because, they may have more of a competitive edge. That's why we try to shoot for most of our erratas. Every once in a while, there's other card reasons too. That's where we stand. We're really happy with this. We're really excited to, see this card work like this. But as for any future versions of this card we may see, like GX and afterwards, if they play the card with the actual printed effect, then it's going to be that. This would be an exclusive to, the movie or the early anime type of errata. That's what I'm going to say. I know I've been talking a lot about this as one card. One, maybe controversial card. Maybe no one really cares. You guys are just sitting there saying, all right, cool, this next card. All right. Moving on, the very last card in the deck, Ring of Destruction, is one of our previous erratas because the original printing of this card was fine. That was the anime version. Konami has since neutered the card so they could come off the ban list and be more practical to play with. That's the part we're changing back to the original effect. So if you ever have an original Ring of Destruction, that's what we're going with. The original one, target a monster, destroy it, both players take equal damage. Simple as that. And then the fusion monsters, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, required for the summoning of Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, and XYZ Dragon Can, which, it was nice to see it come back from Battle City. but in a smaller duel, not the big duel against Yugi. So that is the deck profile for Kaiba's Pyramid of Light movie deck. Again, the deck lists were already there. We just built the decks off the list, but we made the necessary change so that the deck could play like it did in the anime. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more of the content we're putting out now from the Pyramid of Light. Now following Dark Side Dimensions. And again, we were going to do Yugi and Kaiba's decks last fall. The tournament kind of took precedence over all of that. So now we decided to build the full out movie, and it's coming out as follows. So see you guys.